Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Prime Minister Boris Johnson has arrived in New York for the annual UN General Assembly meeting and discussions on climate change. Questions have followed him there about whether the American businesswoman Jennifer Arcuri got special access and public funding when Mr Johnson was Mayor of London. Our deputy political editor John Pienaar is in New York and asked Mr Johnson about the allegations.
All I can say is I'm very proud of what we did when I was Mayor of London, very proud of everything that we did, particularly banging the drum for our city and country around the world. And I can tell you absolutely that everything was done entirely in the proper way.
So Boris Johnson's first response to these reports, a direct statement. There was no impropriety in his dealings with the American businesswoman, the former model Jennifer Arcuri. This clearly touches on Boris Johnson's personal integrity and in that way on his fitness for office. And as you saw, he plainly decided that he needed to confront them directly. On the flight into New York just last night, he was asked 6 times about this by journalists, and 6 times he stonewalled, refused to say anything.
First tonight, he may be Prime Minister now, but could the former London Mayor Boris Johnson be summoned back to City Hall for questioning? As we've been hearing, it's over claims he failed to declare a potential conflict of interest while he was Mayor, giving thousands of pounds of public money to a US businesswoman who joined him on trade missions. Speaking in New York today, Mr Johnson claims everything was done in the proper way. However, his successor, Sadiq Khan, has launched an investigation. Here's our political correspondent, Carl Mercer.
Overseas and pressing the flesh. Now, of course, he's Prime Minister, but this sort of glad-handing is nothing new to Boris Johnson. As Mayor, he went on several trips abroad, pushing London businesses, encouraging other cities to trade here.
And clear. Here we go.
But at the weekend, the Sunday Times newspaper raised questions over who he took on those trips and who he backed with taxpayers' money.
Come to London, build your businesses here. The Mayor of London supports you.
They allege he used his friendship with this woman, Jennifer Arcuri, to help to get her funding and access.
You like hanging out with us, right?
I do. I'm always happy to hang out at Innotech.
She denies any wrongdoing at all, but today the man who replaced Boris Johnson at City Hall announced an inquiry into the claims.
Now look at what processes were in place when Boris Johnson was Mayor, were these processes followed and what lessons need to be learned. But it's important for me to say at the moment, all I know is what I've read in the newspaper. That's why it's important for there to be a proper process followed.
City Hall confirmed today that Jennifer Arcuri's firm had been sponsored by London and Partners for 2 events. The first in 2013 to the tune of £10,000, the second in June the following year for £1,500. It also confirmed that in November 2014 she joined Mr Johnson on a City Hall trade mission to Malaysia, then another one to New York in February 2015 and a further one to Tel Aviv later that year. It appears the Mayor may not be the only one asking questions, because it looks like the London Assembly's Oversight Committee will summons Boris Johnson to explain how he spent public money. They did it before when he was Foreign Secretary to answer questions on the Garden Bridge.
It is indeed thoroughly right that the expenditure of taxpayers' money in our city should be properly invigilated.
So is it worth getting him back again?
Well, it's public money and it's about process, it's about integrity in public office. The Mayor of London, as he was then, now the Prime Minister, he seems to believe there's one rule for him and one rule for the rest of us. Well, that needs to change and we need to look at this.
In New York, the Prime Minister dismissed the claims.
Well, all I can say is I'm very proud of what we did when I was Mayor of London, very proud of everything that we did, particularly banging the drum for our city and country around the world. And I can tell you absolutely that everything was done entirely in the proper way.
You accept these are serious suggestions?
Well, I can tell you that everything was done entirely in the proper way.
City Hall says it hopes to start its investigation as soon as possible. Carl Mercer, BBC London.
OK, let's get the thoughts of our political editor, Tim Donovan, who's at the Labour Party conference in Brighton. And Tim, what's the feeling down there about this?
Whereas you won't be surprised to learn that Labour are very keen for this to be pursued further. They want to keep the pressure on. Indeed, yesterday, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn took to social media unhappy at what he saw as the lack of reporting about this. He was accusing the media of the kind of establishment cover-up that he's been talking about here at conference. Sadiq Khan, for his part, is clearly going to have to take a back seat on this now, on this matter. Not so much on the rest of his political activities down here, because he's been here trying to drum up support ahead of his bid to get back to City Hall next May.
Well, the Prime Minister was discussing Brexit and Saudi Arabia this evening in New York with President Macron of France and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. But that wasn't the only subject that has followed him across the Atlantic to the United Nations. A newspaper report claimed businesswoman Jennifer Arcuri, a friend of Mr Johnson, was allocated public money while he was Mayor of London. Listen in a moment to his answers when our political correspondent Carl Dinnan asks him whether he intervened to get her on a trade delegation. And why does it matter when there is Brexit and climate change to worry about? Why? Well, his critics say it is a matter of trust.
Arriving at the UN in New York today, Boris Johnson sought to prevent any escalation in the row over his relationship with a London-based American businesswoman when he was London Mayor, denying he had done anything improper.
I can tell you absolutely everything was done with full propriety and in accordance with proper procedures.
Jennifer Arcuri was a friend of Mr Johnson's when he was London Mayor. He attended a number of her Innotech networking events.
Thank you so much. You like hanging out with us, right?
I do. I'm always happy to hang out at Innotech.
Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London!
She was also given a place on a trade delegation he led to Malaysia after originally being turned down for the trip. And an internal email about another trade delegation she was not officially on says she has been speaking to Boris and a senior advisor about her being in New York, and they are both apparently happy with that. So we should treat her as simply another member of the London tech community.
Did you intervene to get Jennifer Arcuri on trade delegations?
I am very, very confident that if you look at the record of what we achieved in London, everything was done.
But did you intervene? Did you intervene to get Jennifer Arcuri on a trade delegation she wasn't qualified to be on?
As indeed I have been doing today.
What was the nature of your relationship with Jennifer Arcuri? Were you friends, or was it something else?
I'm very happy to tell you, Carl, that I worked incredibly hard as Mayor of London to promote our city, and very happy with the results. I'm very happy with the results of what we've done.
Look at that! Boris is taking out!
There is also now a Department of Culture investigation into the award of £100,000 to one of Arcuri's companies earlier this year, at a time when Boris Johnson was not in government.
Were you in any way involved in the award of that money to Jennifer Arcuri's companies?
Of course not, but you know, I'm very, very happy with what we did in the London Mayoralty to promote our city and our country.
Jennifer Arcuri says any grants received by my companies and any trade mission I joined were purely in respect of my role as a legitimate businesswoman. A short time ago, the Prime Minister met both the German Chancellor and the French President to talk about Brexit, hopeful that the Arcuri questions may now be behind him.